Morning, everyone. I always like to see fake news in the wild, and, propaganda costs money, so you might as well read it, right? Not really. But I just want to show you what kind of stuff they're putting out there to sanitize this. This stuff plays well in Quebec. So Norman Spencer is tweeting, and he says, Liberal MP, quote, Trudeau and his team were right to raise the question of SNC Lavalин's workers and pensioners and head office. The real scandal would have been not to, as the Conservatives appear to be. And so we'll have a look at this fake news propaganda drivel that is being printed by La Presse. And I'll scroll down, but I had to translate this. So this is Google Translate, but it says SNC Lavalin case, Justin Trudeau and his team did very well. Really? Really? And I don't have, where's the date on this? March 3rd, okay? So scrolling down to the bottom, it says, this is the last bit of the article. It says, quote, it is important to note that the SNC executives who have committed offenses or crimes must be prosecuted, but the law also provides for those who are not related to these crimes do not have to pay for the consequences of these acts reprehensible. There are 9,000 workers in Canada, including 3,000 in Quebec. I met with SNC Lavalin pensioners who have nothing to do with what happened. This section of the law that provides for repair agreements does not exist for nothing. He's talking about DPAs or repudiation agreements. Sorry, to be clear there. That's the problem of the Google Translate, I think. Back to the article. I think that Justin Trudeau and his team did a great job of raising the issue of SNC Lavalin workers and pensioners and the head office. The real scandal would have been not to deal with it, which the Conservatives seem to be doing. Here the problem lies, though, is in setting up a system where if you're a big enough company with enough jobs, you can break the law with impunity and then wait years until the laws are changed for you to agree to pay some money back in order for you to continue bidding on the same government contracts that you broke the law to get previously. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So setting up a two-tiered legal system isn't comfortable for Canadians. Having the Liberals sneak in criminal code changes into a budget bill in the middle of summer, Canadians aren't comfortable with that either, but people don't seem to be talking about that. Having a DPA agreement available to giant corporations like SNC Lavalin is inappropriate, especially, and not just especially, but particularly when you are running a small business and you have to compete with everybody else who has to compete on the same level playing field until you get to big enough, and then you get to break the law with impunity, right? Then you just call the Prime Minister and say, hey, listen, put some pressure on the Attorney General, make sure we don't have to sign or we don't have to have any criminal consequences for this. We'd really like to continue bidding on federal contracts. And the Prime Minister says, okay, and then we see what's happening with the SNC Lavalin and Jody Wilson-Raybould fallout. So this is the drivel that's being printed. They're doing quite well, really. Yes, perfect. We love when they protect jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. No, this is ridiculous. It's an affront to democracy. It's an affront to rule of law. It is spitting in the face of rule of law. And this guy knows it. And he's just trying to get away with it. That's the thing. And he's trying to change the channel. Right. I'm not quite ready to change the channel yet, Justin. And if we have to talk about climate change, let me tell you, I've got some things to talk to you about on that too. National News Watch is reporting Liberals seek to change channel from SNC Lavalin, focus on climate plan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will try to shift the focus from SNC Lavalin affair to his preferred campaign battleground, climate change, with the release this week of the Liberal Party's first election year ads. Radio ads will air in the 4 provinces where the federal government is imposing a carbon tax after their Conservative provincial governments refuse to levy their own price on carbon: Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and New Brunswick. The ads stress that the money raised from the tax will be rebated directly to residents in those provinces. Trudeau will set the stage for the ad campaign with a climate action rally in Toronto on Monday night. Yeah, right. The ads will then begin airing Tuesday morning, aimed at commuters. The message delivered by Trudeau is identical for the 4 provinces. Aside from the amount of money to be rebated to the residents, which varies depending on the amount of carbon emissions to be taxed in each province. According to the ads, the average family of 4 will receive more than $600 this year in Saskatchewan, more than $300 in Ontario and Manitoba, and more than $250 in New Brunswick. Quote, we have a strong plan to fight climate change and one that leading scientists and economists support. It makes polluters pay and gives the money back to people. Listen, that may be all well and good, and despite the fact that your scientists and economists are paid off and parrots of what you tell them to say, that aside, your immigration plan is contradictory to fighting climate change. When you bring people from a warm, low carbon emission climate like South Africa, right, and bring them to Canada, you are doing the same as having babies. And we've been told for years, stop having babies. That's the best way to fight climate change. So why would importing all of those people not also increase Canada's emissions? Should we not be good world citizens and make our emissions as low as possible, despite the fact that we're 1.5% of world emissions and the fact that we have an enormous amount of trees in our enormously large country? Isn't that a strange thing to do, to be bringing in a whole lot of people who will necessarily be consuming and making more carbon emissions when in Canada than they would have otherwise if they stayed in their home region? Why would we do this? It makes no sense. Like, really, no sense. If you want to fight climate change and want to reduce emissions, bringing people from low carbon emission countries to high carbon emission country like Canada makes no sense at all. Okay, here's Kelly McParland, and he says, this argument entirely misses the point. The scandal wasn't in the DPP's decision. It was in the PM's effort to force his AG, Attorney General, into changing her mind despite the conviction. Her conviction that it was wrong to do so, and firing her when she refused. And here is more fake news, and it's the Globe and Mail reporting a deferred prosecution agreement is not what you think it is. So this is meant, again, to get the average reader to fall asleep. We've already seen this before. DPAs are totally something the G7 countries do, not Canada, not until 2018, not until the Liberals snuck the criminal code changes into Bill C-74 in the middle of summer when you weren't paying attention because you were busy. Trying to relax, right? Trying to take your 2 weeks off. You're not going to think about politics then. So they sneak it in then. Anyway, here's the Globe and Mail saying, quote, deferred prosecution agreement is not what you think it is. A few months ago, Via Rail awarded a $989 million contract to Siemens to provide the 32 transits that will replace its fleet for Canada's business rail corridor, representing at least a tacit endorsement from the Crown Corporation of Canada for the German multinational. And why not? It's one of the world's largest electrical engineering companies after all. But just a decade ago, this might have been far more controversial. In 2006, Siemens was accused of organizing a global system of corruption, paying more than $1.4 billion US dollars in bribes to government officials around the world. In the end, it agreed to a deferred prosecution agreement with German prosecutors. So not in Canada, guys, in Germany. But no, this is totally, it's the same thing, right? Back to the article. Charges against the corporation were dropped in exchange for an agreement to pay €395 million fine, overhaul its management, and allow its operations to be closely monitored. In the United States, the company paid a fine of US $450 million to the Department of Justice and $350 million to the Securities and Exchange Commission. So do you have that kind of money to buy your way out of following the law? No. Oh, well, don't worry about it. These guys do, and they do it a lot. See, the U.S. has got it, and the United Kingdom, and Germany. How come you guys don't want a two-tier system? Canada, these guys are doing just fine. Back to the article. Indeed, this deal was only one of the roughly 20 to 40 DPAs that are negotiated every year in the United States. Officials there see it as an efficient tool to oppose reforms, impose compliance controls, and impose all sorts of behavioral change. In the corporate world, many European countries have adopted the same practices, including Britain and the Netherlands. The same rules were incorporated into Canada's criminal law too. And 13 years later, it's clear that this DPA was enough for Canadians to believe that Siemens had rehabilitated itself. Now, I don't know what they're talking about. 13 years later, our laws weren't changed 13 years ago. Our laws were changed not even 13 months ago. It was August of last year that they passed the C-34, I believe. That's when it got royal assent. I could be mistaken on the exact date, though. But see how this article is trying to spin truths? 13 years since the 2006 German DPA, right? Not the Canadian ones that are happening now, improperly and with pressure on the AG, who was going to allow her public prosecutor to go forward with charges against SNC until the Prime Minister removed the Attorney General from her position for not playing ball, right? For jobs. Right. Sure. I believe that too, right? Back to the article. But when a Canadian company, such as Quebec engineering firm SNC Lavalin, tries to negotiate such an agreement, it's as if we're talking about corruption of the highest degree, and now pundits are acting as if Justin Trudeau's government is operating like John A. Macdonald during the Pacific scandal, which saw MPs accepting bribes from businesses hoping to build Canada's transnational railway. Now, I find this comparison interesting. Why not throw in a dig to our first Prime Minister, eh? Screw that guy, right? Let's take his statue down as well. That white male. So interesting, isn't it? So they tossed in that scandal, comparing the pundits screaming about John A. Macdonald as if Justin Trudeau were half the man John A. was. And I just find it so interesting, right? Like the spin they're trying to put out there. So yes, when a Quebec firm tries to kick the can down the road, get laws changed, lobbies the Prime Minister a couple of hundred times, and his PMO, and his Privy Council, and gets the Prime Minister to remove the sitting AG because she wouldn't play ball, yeah, that's a problem, guys. That's a problem. That's a two-tiered legal system, and no, Canada doesn't want it. And if you're saying that all these other countries set up here, the Netherlands and all these European countries have adopted this, why not debate it? Why not put it into a criminal code bill and have a debate in the House of Commons? Do it right up front. Why did you sneak it in? Why did you sneak it under in cover of summer in a budget bill that nobody would read, and you knew nobody would read, except now this whole thing's blowing up and people are looking, and they're looking at you. Here's the final part of this. Never mind that the law permits this, nor that we've only heard from 2 witnesses. Some commenters have already concluded that she was the victim of undue pressure, if not a grave assault against her constitutional independence. Andrew Scheer has even claimed that this represents a criminal attempt to obstruct justice. It does not. Ha, okay. And yes, he does indeed. Here's Andrew Scheer. And he does say, it is contrary to section 423(1-1) of the Criminal Code to engage in any conduct with the intent to provoke fear in the Attorney General. It is further contrary to section 139 of the Criminal Code to attempt to obstruct or defeat the course of justice. And that is in Mr. Scheer's letter. And I thought, well, let's have a look at that. And here is 139. Criminal Code of Canada 139, and link will be in the description. You can read it for yourself. Okay, and it says 139.1. Everyone who willfully attempts in any manner to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice in a judicial proceeding, A, by indemnifying or agreeing to indemnify. I wanted to look at what indemnify meant. And in this situation, it means secure against legal liability for their actions. It could also mean compensate, I suppose, but I think this one is better. So it's going to indemnify you. It's going to secure you against your consequences for that. By indemnifying or agreeing to indemnify a surety. And I wanted to know what a surety is. And a surety is a person who takes responsibility for another's performance of an undertaking. For example, they're appearing in court or for payment of a debt. So if you have a surety, a lawyer who's going to go to the court for you to see to your summary offense, right? That's what a surety is. Somebody who says, yeah, I'm going to do this in your stead, and you don't have to worry about it, right? Because you don't want somebody to not show up in court on your behalf, because then that's you not showing up, and then you could get thrown in jail for that, right? That's bad. Okay, so I'm going to start back over so we know what everything is. By indemnifying or agreeing to indemnify a surety in any way, and either in whole or in part, or where he is a surety by accepting or agreeing to accept a fee or any form of indemnity, where or whether in whole or in part, from or in respect of a person who is released or is to be released from custody, is guilty of an indictable offense and is liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years, or an offense punishable on the summary conviction. An addendum is, number 2, everyone who willfully attempts in any manner other than the manner described in section 1. So if you go further than that, to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 10 years. So if all you do is this, if all you do is obstruct and pervert or defeat the course of justice, in a judicial processing, then you could be up to 2 years or maybe a summary conviction. But if you do more, then it's potentially 10 years in prison, and it's an indictable offense. Okay, that's very interesting. And so here's the proof of offense, and this is number 2. It says the culprit attempts to obstruct, pervert, or defeat the course of justice. The prohibited conduct was in any manner other than described in section 139.1. That's the further one. The first one we talked about. Number 3 is where judicial proceedings are existing or proposed, the obstruction will be deemed if the culprit dissuades or attempts to dissuade a person by threats, bribes, or other corrupt means from giving evidence, influences or attempts to influence by threats, bribes, or other corrupt means a person in his conduct as a juror, or accepts or obtains, agrees to accept or attempt to obtain a bribe or other corrupt consideration to abstain from giving evidence, or to do or refrain from doing anything as a juror. So, I mean, does what Mr. Trudeau and his PMO and the Privy Council do rise to that level of criminality? I honestly don't know. They continually say that Jody Wilson-Raybould said it wasn't criminal. I think that she was being a responsible legal person and realizing that she is tainted in rendering a decision on that, decided to leave it vague because she's involved, right? You can't say someone is guilty, in my opinion, if you're involved in the situation, if you're also the judge. And her saying that, well, I mean, would have given her responsibility for those words, right? And I think that legally that's dicey. So I think that's probably why she said it wasn't criminal or it didn't rise to that level or whatever. But anyway, I find it interesting. I don't know that this is enough. I think Trudeau's just going to ignore this. We'll see what Jerry Butts has to say when he takes the stand. I don't know. The only reason I could think that he wants to take the stand is he's got something to say, and I think they want to try and discredit Miss Wilson-Raybould's testimony. But here's the other crux of that. I was watching Stephen Molyneux, sorry if I've got your name wrong, sir, and he was saying that if she's lying, then her being in charge of justice in Canada for the last 3 years, she oversaw the legalization of marijuana, she oversaw the legalization of assisted dying. Everything that she's done will have to be re-examined. If she's lying, if it's found that she has been somebody capable of lying about the PMO's inner circle, and she's been in charge of justice for the last 3 years, what a loose cannon to have in charge of justice. What a crazy person to have in charge of justice. Like, you've checkmated yourself, Justin Trudeau. By calling this person crazy, you're responsible for putting your cabinet together, Justin Trudeau. Right? And you put this crazy liar in there, according to you? What? Right? So is it obstruction of justice, or is she lying? I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. Let's see what Jerry has to say. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day. Check out the People's Party of Canada.ca.